Let's get this show started.
No, it's let's get the show on the road.
Let's get the
Humero
show.
numero uno.
Humero numero uno. We're quoting HQ for those who didn't know it.
You're listening to How to Get Away with Shakespeare with Jane Fox and Gabriel Vega. Starting now.
Sponsored by Audible.
Well, I heard you had a busy weekend, Jane.
I did. Well, I traveled to a conference, QUEC, which is the Quebec University's undergraduate English conference in Sherbrooke.
Sherbrooke, as we say it, because it's my province. I was born there.
But it's also a British word.
I was born in Montreal, for those interested, because Jane just cut me off. I was born in Montreal.
Listen, did I just interrupt you?
Yeah, she just interrupted me. No, but I was born in Montreal. Sherbrooke is a little bit up south, and I was born in the north. So yeah, I was like, "You're going to Montreal without me?" And I was like,
Well, I mean, you have to stay here and take care of your dogs, so.
Yeah, but yeah, it felt weird that somebody was heading to Montreal and I wasn't there.
Yeah, and there was so much snow here there. I was surprised. Like, there was snow on the ground everywhere.
There's always snow everywhere in Montreal. We live in Toronto right now, and there's no snow at all.
No snow.
No snow at all. And in Montreal, when my family FaceTimes me, there's always snow. Always snow. And they have the worst snowstorms ever.
I'm so jealous. I love the snow so much.
I dislike
really
the snow.
Well, you moved
I hate
to the
the snow.
place.
No, but let's be fair here. I grew up with the snow, and now I'm tired of it. And I
That's
need a
fair.
sunny place. And you grew up in a sunny place.
Well, for half my life, but I also lived in Vermont on the side of a mountain, and Maine, where it's essentially Canada, and it snows a lot.
Right. But you still had the sun for a little part of your life.
Well, that makes it sound like nowhere else gets sun.
No.
There's sun in Toronto in the summer, which is like 2 months long.
No, but it's not the same climate anyway.
I don't know. I mean, it's the same area. It's weird because they have like the lake, or we have the lake effect. I'm always confused by that. Because Toronto has the lake effect, right?
What is the lake effect?
I don't know. People always say, "Oh, it's the lake effect," right? And I'm like, "Oh yeah, it's the lake effect."
What
I don't
the hell
know.
does that mean?
It's something to do with like the temperature.
Oh, the lake is influencing the weather?
I don't mean like it's not like some mystical thing where like the moon and the lake are like combining forces. I just mean like they mean like because the lake is there, the wind like rushes across it or something, and it does something differently. But I'm not a weather scientist, and I do not understand. So something happens with the lake, and that's why they call it the lake effect.
Please email us at How to Get Away with Shakespeare. This is so related to Shakespeare, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Well, the lake effect. You know, there are lakes in the green space. Anyway, so there were panels on Shakespeare. I didn't get to go to all of them, but I got to do a panel on marginalized bodies in sort of more film and pop culture. But I did Malcolm X, which was really fun.
Really? Malcolm X?
Yeah, Malcolm X. He's fantastic. And then I got food poisoning.
Really?
Yep.
What the hell happened?
I ate suspicious food late
Suspicious?
at night. Well, essentially we ordered from a sushi place, but when the food came, I was like, this is really oily and also tastes more like Chinese food. So I'm really suspicious about the cooking method. And then, yeah, it really went downhill. But
yeah, we were gonna record our podcast 2 days ago, and Jane just said, "Oh, I'm sick. I'm throwing up." Well, I was like, "Okay."
Not to give you the gory details, but it was terrible. And hopefully I'm recovered now. If not, if you hear a loud splattering noise, then...
Yeah, if we hear a loud splattering noise, we'll tell you. You're clearly not recovered.
No.
Anyway, for me, I had a not so much a busy weekend, but interestingly, it's relevant to Shakespeare. On Friday, I went to a conference, and Stephen Orgel was speaking. And if you don't know who Stephen Orgel is, look at not all of them, but most of your Pelican Shakespeare editions, and he edited a lot of them. He edited the version of King Lear that we'll use today. He edited the Winter's Tale, Pericles, a bunch of other Shakespearean thing. I think he's one of the main authors, one of the two main
for sure,
editors of Shakespeare out there.
Him and probably Stephen Greenblatt.
Let's just say the good editions, because there are so many Shakespeare editions.
Well, there are some like $2 copies, which are great because they're accessible, but like you don't get the great quality editing and like all the stuff they put in, like the extras, you know.
Yeah, we're saying we're recommending the Pelican editions because the notes in it. Mm-hmm. That's why we're recommending it. Like, you can purchase No Fear Shakespeare, I don't care, but I'm just saying that you'll have a better time reading the Pelican edition.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
Anyway, so today, what are we talking about, Jane?
Well, first we should talk about listener emails, right?
Oh, yeah. We have some listener emails that came in. Rosalie said, she talked about Scar because last week we were talking about the difference between, I was asking, why are the two brothers, Scar and Mufasa, brothers? Because they don't look alike. And
right.
Rosalie replied, supposedly Scar was never actually Mufasa's brother, usually a pride as one male and all the female lions around. But if there is a second male in the pride, then he is considered a lesser lion. And he kind of goes off into the shadows, so that's the old idea of Scar, she says. And what happens in the pride is that when the male get old, another male lion comes in and kills him, and then kills all his babies and then takes over the pride. So that's what Scar was trying to do.
I mean, it's interesting because that does make sense in the context of, like, actual lions, but I feel like it does mention in the movie that they're brothers, doesn't it?
No, well, I know that it mentions that he's the uncle to Simba, that I know for sure.
Right.
But I don't know that they mentioned that they are brothers.
Oh, so maybe he could be related on the other side of the family.
Because we were talking about Hamlet, and in Hamlet there are brothers.
Right.
But if we compare it, are Scar and Mufasa brothers? I don't know. I don't think so.
Yeah. What if he's actually related to, like, one of the female lionesses? Like, what's her name? Sarabi? What if he's the uncle on the other side of the family?
They don't look alike, though.
No, but all the female lionesses look the same. So none of them look like Scar. None of them look Mufasa or Simba. They all look exactly like Nala and Sarabi. They just have slightly different, like, facial features.
Right. But, yeah, I don't see it. I feel like Scar and the females are not.
I mean, he's related to someone, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the second film, as you mentioned, and they start to look like him.
Yeah, they do. Because it's like his offspring.
Yeah.
And they're terrifying.
Anyway, that was a really good listener email. Thank you, Rosalie.
Yes.
We're not going to talk about Lion King today.
No.
But thank you for pointing that out. That's really, because that was a big question that we had last week. Why are they brothers?
Exactly, yeah.
They don't look alike at all. Also, we've been getting some comments on Instagram. It's been going super well. With our post. Check out our Instagram at How to Get Away with Shakespeare and subscribe. So Kelly Ajakik, how do you say that?
Kalia Jakic? I don't know.
She says, this is what my teacher was talking about, how the Lion King was Hamlet's Disney version. Yeah, Cool. So I'm glad that teachers are talking about the influence of Shakespeare on pop culture.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't remember anyone talking about that when I was in school, which, I mean, I feel like would make Shakespeare a lot more interesting to a lot of people. Like, instead of reading, like, an abridged version, someone might be really interested if they're like, well, look at The Lion King and look at Hamlet and see how they're alike, and students might be interested by that, you know?
Yeah. So, yeah. Please keep sending us comments, emails. We'd like to hear your thoughts. So, welcome to the How to Get Away with Shakespeare podcast. This is episode 3, and today we're going to talk about
Bloodline, season 1.
Only season 1.
We have not seen the other ones.
And we're not going to see them. Because apparently season 2 and season 3 are bad. Season 2 apparently has mixed reviews, and season 3 has negative reviews.
But season 1 is worth watching. Like, I do recommend it.
Yeah.
I'm picky, so.
We were talking earlier, and then Jane said they should have stuck with one season. I totally agree.
It just worked so well in, like, a single sort of one fell swoop, to use a Shakespearean term. Like, you know, you don't need to drag it out.
No, but also, I mean, like, when you build a show, usually you have a 5-season plan, and it looks like, from what I've seen from season 1, they only add a 1-season plan.
For sure, yeah.
But I mean, nowadays it's usually that, because there are less and less seasons, because a movie stars come in or whatever it is, and they don't want to be signed on for like 6 seasons, so they do like 3, they do like 2. It's more limited.
I mean, I'd be interested to know what happened behind the scenes. Like, did the directors want to keep going with it, or was it like the network, you know, that kind of thing? Like,
I'm interested if, like, season 2 had a different showrunner, actually, because it looks like the original writer, the creator of the show, had a big plan, and his writing was so freaking good. And I don't know what happened there, but we're only going to talk about season 1 today.
So don't worry about spoilers if you haven't seen past that. And if you haven't seen it, you only need to watch the first season, so don't worry about having to get through, like, you know, 50 hours of the show. You only have to get through 13 hours of the show. And
we guarantee the first 13 hours of the show are sensational.
Yes, we do guarantee that. Should we give some kind of explanation of the show? Do we have that planned?
Yeah, let me just say, though, that we're going to do a King Lear with Bloodline today. So how are they similar? How are they different? Okay, so Jane, do you want to tell us what Bloodline season 1 is about?
Yes, I will womansplain it.
Womansplain it.
Okay, so essentially season 1 of the drama series is about a wealthy family who run a successful beachside hotel in the Florida Keys. And the prodigal oldest son, Danny Rayburn, and the black sheep of the clan shows up. And the Rayburns are forced to decide Danny's role in the family when his reappearance triggers a return to his long history of illicit behavior and illegal business ventures. And then John Rayburn, the deputy sheriff of the county, and his younger siblings, Meg and Kevin, attempt to keep their brother under control while preventing dark secrets from the family's past from being revealed.
Yeah, so it's, What do you think of the initial... from that synopsis, the initial comparison to Bloodline, to King Lear, excuse me.
I mean, the thing is that for me, immediately, like when you first look at it, it doesn't look that much like King Lear, except for the whole thing surrounding the father's will. Like when I first started watching it, I was like, I don't know, like I don't see it.
Yeah, me too. I was like, and then at episode 3, like episode 1 and 2 were like, okay, there's something with the family. There's clearly a father that doesn't, and the children, and a father that looks down on one of his children. Like it's not the same with Danny and Cordelia, but it's kind of the same dynamic.
Exactly. Yeah.
But then episode 3, there's the will. Mm-hmm. And then and then Danny is just kicked out of the will. At first, Robert Rayburn decides that he does not want Danny in the will. And then Megan's like, oh, we could kind of keep him in the will.
Meg sticks up for him, which isn't that what is it Kent does in King Lear? Yeah, so she sort of stands up for him the same way. Right.
And then Robert Rayburn, he has a heart attack. Or
he has a stroke.
A stroke.
Yeah.
He has a stroke, and then he goes into the hospital, and Meg's like, are we doing this? Are we taking out Danny out of the will, or are we not? And but like Robert Rayburn can't say anything because he's in a coma or something. Yeah. And then when he wakes up, he's like delusional at first. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't even know who Meg is. He doesn't even know who Danny is. He doesn't even know nothing about any will, about anything, really.
Yeah, he's just sort of speaking nonsense, yeah.
And then when he comes back from the coma, or he comes back to his rationality and is being normal again, he says, oh no, I don't want Danny in the will. Mm-hmm. Right. So, yeah, it's kind of the same. Are there things you've seen that were kind of similar and different at first? The first five episodes?
In the first 5, man, it's difficult to remember what happens in the first 5 exactly. But I remember thinking like there wasn't really a Cordelia figure, which is what threw me off at first.
Yeah, so is Danny, that was one of my questions, is Danny a Cordelia? Or I also thought of him as Edmund, because Edmund is the bastard son, and he's looked down upon by his father. So yeah, it's kind of the same as Danny and Robert Rayburn's relationship in a way. But it still feels, with the sisters and everything, it still feels like a King Lear situation, and not of Edmund and I don't know his father's name. I don't remember. King Lear. Do you know?
Is it? It's not Gloucester.
Gloucester, yeah.
Gloucester, yeah.
So Gloucester, it's not the same relationship, but it still feels like Lear. But with the relationship he has with his 3 children, it's just that Danny doesn't feel like a Cordelia. He feels more like an Edmund.
I agree in part, though I think in some ways he is similar to Cordelia, because he also doesn't sort of pay like the typical lip service to his father. Like, he's not going to say beautiful things about him at the funeral. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's not willing to just say like nice things to appease him.
Yeah, he's also honest in a way. He's also he's kind of Cordelia in terms of honesty.
And he is sort of playing her role in mixing things up in the family. Like, they both sort of break that established norm, like where Goneril and Regan are both, they're all going along with essentially what the father wants, and he's the only one who's sort of...
They're kissing his ass.
Exactly, yeah. He's the
at
only
least
one,
at first, yeah.
Even in the end, like, we see he's the one suggesting all these changes to the family, the way they run the hotel, and everyone else is saying, well, consistency, that's what Dad wanted. And he's like, well, Dad's not around, like, we should change things up. And I think that's also the role that Cordelia is sort of playing.
Yeah. And also, with Danny going to Eric Bannon and Chelsea, because the King of France accepts Cordelia and respects her honesty. Mm-hmm. And Eric Bannon and Chelsea, well, Eric mostly respects Danny's honesty, and he respects that Danny doesn't kiss the ass of his family.
At the same time, though, I mean, is Danny a really honest figure? Because I think he gets pretty manipulative towards the end. At the beginning, he appears honest, I guess.
Yeah. No, I feel like he's honest at times. Mm-hmm. He also asks for money, like his father says, a lot. Yeah. So he's kind of like kissing his ass for that too. But like he's not like the others. He's not like as civil, or as like he doesn't show as much respect or as much pretentiousness, or like as the others, I feel.
Yeah, there's even that point where he and the father are having a discussion, and the dad says, like, you know what I like about us, Danny? We can both just lay our cards on the table.
Yeah.
Like, honesty.
Honesty. Yeah, so that's what I feel. But yeah, all these characters though live in the gray area. I feel they're not just honest. They're not just villains. They're not just like sometimes they're honest, sometimes they're villainous, sometimes they're disrespectful, sometimes whatever. They live in the gray area. So my next question is for you. Are the other three children, which are John, Kevin, and Meg, Goneril and Regan?
In some way, I guess they would be, because a lot of sort of the decision making of the kingdom is then placed onto them, the kingdom being like the hotel. But I don't know. I mean, I find it difficult to imagine either of them getting their father's eyes plucked, or their father's servant's eyes plucked out, for example. You know what I mean?
And Goneril and Regan are both equally as bad, and they're both equally villainous. They don't really live in gray areas that much. There's the point, though, in the first, I think after Cordelia gets exiled, that Goneril says, "He always loved our sister most, and with what poor judgment he had now cast her off appears too grossly." And Regan responds, the infirmity is age." And yeah, so it kind of reminded me of the way Meg questions Robert Rayburn's decision to take Danny out of the will.
Yeah, it is the infirmity of old age.
But after that, Goneril and Regan just go on this villainous path.
Though, I mean, I don't think Meg is the greatest character, like the most, there's one point where John is like, my sister always tries to do the best for everyone. And I was like, I don't see that happening, So,
she wanted the best for Danny at first, and then she found out who he really was. They all found out who he really was. And,
that's true.
And then she changed her mind, and then she turned on him. Yeah, she wanted the best for him, and then bye when she found out that he was so evil.
Yeah, the minute that she picked sides, everything started to go sour.
Yeah. So are they Goneril and Regan? I don't know. I feel like they have their moments. I feel like sometimes they're like at first, in the first, let's say, 7 episodes, I found John, Kevin, and Meg hyper villainous. They were like very. I thought they were the villain of the story, and then when Danny turned,
he did turn all of a sudden. Yeah.
Now I could sympathize with John, Kevin, and Meg. I could understand how they were feeling.
See, I didn't blame them that much in the beginning because I understood they were trying to preserve sort of the balance of their world.
But I felt like they were cold in the beginning, and I didn't understand why. And then when Danny turned, I was like, oh, God, there are the good guys, and he's the bad guy.
I almost wonder also if you could see Sarah, the daughter who died, as a Cordelia figure, and how that would change the reading of the others.
Right.
Because, I mean, one of the big things about Cordelia is her silence, but she also had the strongest bond with their father. And the same thing is true of the dead daughter, obviously. She's not talking, but it's said that she had the strongest bond with Robert.
Yeah.
Rayburn.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see how the dead daughter, Sarah, changes the dynamic between the 4 children. It feels like this old thing happened because of her.
Mm-hmm. It does.
And what would happen if she was alive?
So in that way, it does sort of make her the Cordelia.
Because it's kind of the moment they all turned on Danny, when Danny chose to bring her on the boat and said, "Oh, I'm the adult. I don't need an adult to bring my sister on the boat because I'm already an adult." And and then she drowned.
Yeah, she got her hand stuck in the reef, and
And it was all Danny's fault. They all blamed Danny, and since then they all turned on him. Yeah. Do you agree or not?
I agree, yeah. And, you do really feel bad for him when you find that out. And you do understand that his life could have gone a very different way. So I think he's definitely one of those characters where you can see the gray area a lot in the beginning.
Yeah.
Even towards the end, you see he's still thinking about what happened to her years later.
I said hyper-villainous earlier, but I feel like there were more, like, at first I felt bad for Danny a lot. And so I thought, like, the three children were kind of not cool with him. They were, like, kind of bullying him in a way. Like, they didn't treat him fairly, I felt. They looked down on him.
I was a little bit, because I felt like there was more that he had done in the past that was bad, so I kind of understood that. But what I didn't understand was the way they were treating their parents. Like, why were they trying to take over already when their parents were still healthy? And, their mom is definitely still healthy and running everything by herself. And they were sort of trying to just skip right over both of them and decide everything on their own,
Yeah. But also Danny wasn't doing drugs in the first, let's say, 4 episodes. And then I started to realize that there was something wrong with him. But before that, he felt just like, oh, he's kind of different than them, and because he's different, they're treating him differently. And then he started doing drugs, and then dealing drugs, and then doing all these evil plans behind their back, and then threatening their families, and then it was just out of the picture for me.
In that way, sort of, when you track it that way, it seems like drugs really are his downfall. Everything really bad he does relates to drugs. Like, when he first starts taking them, that's sort of when that turn happens. And then he starts handing them out to other people, like partying with random people, that kind of thing, turning up late. And then he gets involved in the drug smuggling industry, of course. And that's really when you sort of feel like you have to turn against him at that point, even if you liked him in the beginning.
Yeah.
So I wonder, to what extent the drug industry would actually be sort of the worst villain of the whole thing.
And doesn't Edmund in Shakespeare also, like, we were talking about Danny as Edmund before, doesn't Edmund does things behind his family's back, like to destroy Gloucester?
He does, yeah.
When he finds out that Gloucester doesn't, renounces him as a son, or doesn't like him at all. He does sound like a Danny character there, because he does things to ruin his family.
He does, for sure. And I think one of the things we see after he listens to the tapes is that he wants to make John feel...
Danny does.
Who did I say?
Okay, you're talking about Danny.
Danny, after he listens
Edmund
to the tapes...
didn't listen to the tapes.
Danny wants to make John feel the way that he felt when, he realized that there was nothing he could do to reverse the way that his family thought about him. I think that's very similar to the way that Edmund feels, that, he was born the way that he was. He can't change that. It was something he had no control over, and I think Danny feels the same way. And it's really similar in the way that they're both going after sort of making that person, whether it's their father or their brother, feel the way that they felt, like in exile.
Right. I also thought, before we move on, I also thought of Danny as Iago figure, and as a Richard III figure, because he's kind of Iago because he does things behind people's back, and he toys with them, and he plays with he makes someone believe something, and then he stabs them in the back without you knowing.
Mm-hmm. And Iago was motivated by ambition, right? He wanted the role that Othello got.
Yeah.
So I guess what does
Danny want?
What does Danny want?
I feel like he wants a place in the family at first, and then he says it. He says something. What does he want?
He says, like, I want my share or something like that. He says, like, he wants his piece, like, of the family.
Yeah.
But I think we come to realize that it's not about the money as much for him. Everything else for him is about the money, but not so much the family
also about
thing.
respect, I feel. Because when Kevin sleeps with Chelsea, it's kind of Kevin goes to apologize to Danny, and Danny's like, oh yeah, it's fine, and then he turns Danny, and he has Eric Bannon beat him. And Danny's like, oh my god. He's like, oh, saying something to someone, oh, it's fine. And then he goes behind the back like Iago. He has someone do his bidding for him, or his things for him.
That's true, yeah.
So yeah, it's about respect for Danny. Yeah. And then Iago is about... No, it's also about respect, because he wants, or like more like, because he doesn't like Othello, the fact that he is black. He feels like Othello doesn't belong. He feels like he's lacking. I don't know. Do you know what I mean? He doesn't like that people respect Othello so much.
Yeah, I mean, I guess where Iago feels that he deserves it more than Othello, because Othello's black, and Iago's Italian, feels that he deserves it because he's the oldest in the family, maybe.
Yeah.
All the others should be looking up to him.
And he feels also, he seems to feel that he's the most capable also, because the way he talks to the guests, the way he cooks, everything. He seems like the other three children. I haven't seen them do anything for the motel, actually. And then he does everything. He wants to change the menu. He's very, very there for the motel. So he feels like he's very deserving, and the other three children are more like, we have this business. It's making money. So, okay. Well, we'll just let it run.
At the same time, I wonder, is that because they're respecting their parents running the business? Are they trying not to tread on their feet?
Yeah.
You know?
But, yeah, I feel like Danny is, like, more...
I agree, yeah. He's definitely... We see him doing way more. Like, and he cooks meals for the family. We don't see any of the others preparing meals for anyone except for the women. By the way, we should talk about the women in this show when we get a chance.
Yeah.
I mean, because except for Meg, they're not really...
strong.
They're not really there. I mean...
They're not really.
They're the wives. Yeah. It's all about the brothers, which makes it much more Edmund and Edgar than anything else.
But at first I thought about that, and I was like, oh, might be a turn from the sisters in Lear. They turned them into men. But yeah, it's very weird the way they treat women in that show. Yeah.
Nearly all the stuff with the women is to do with sex. Like, it's, Chelsea's being slept with by different people. And she doesn't have an active role in any of it. They're all talking about her like, I did this to her. I made her say this to me. And then, I mean, even with Belle, Kevin's wife, it's like all about her in relation to him, the divorce.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then Shakespeare deals with women a lot. Women are also often either the wives or the daughters. So yeah, it's interesting to think about the women in this show. Can we talk about who's King Lear? Because I think Robert starts off as King Lear. Mm-hmm. And then, when he dies, I feel like Sally takes over the weak part of King Lear, which is when he's exiled from by Goneril and Regan. Like, she takes that part of the play King Lear. I feel like she plays the reconnecting with her son, and him reconnecting with his daughter Cordelia in the green world.
And I think elements of King Lear throughout all of the characters, really. I mean, especially John and Danny, because we can sort of see John starting off at the point. I mean, even in his opening monologue, or his voiceover, he's saying, the time my life sort of started to come apart was when my brother came home, which is sort of that descent into madness that King Lear is about. And then, of course, Danny, later on we learn that he's been hearing voices and talking to voices, the voice of his sister, which might be drug-induced and also might be, in some way a descent into mental illness, maybe brought on by drugs.
Yeah. Yeah, so I feel like... No, but I felt very much that Sally was taking over in the end, because the children also don't listen to their mother. Like the Goneril and Regan don't listen to Lear after, because basically the business has been given to John, Kevin, and Meg after Robert Rayburn dies. And Goneril and Regan have the kingdoms now also, and so they don't care about Lear or Sally or John Rayburn.
Yeah, and that's another thing in the will. Like, it's left to the children, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, his wife's not mentioned, is she? In the part that we see, which is a little odd. She's been basically running the place.
Well, they've been running it together.
I was going to say.
Yeah, together, I feel like the two of them decided that the children would get it.
But while she was still alive? I don't know. It seems weird.
It seems weird, then. But don't you think that the two of them decided?
I mean, I think Meg says at one point, like, well, Sally, you decided to let Dad figure it out. You didn't want to listen.
Okay.
But I think she realizes then that...
Yeah, she should have...
I don't think she realized that she was going to let herself...
The other children are not doing anything anyway, so she was the one running it with Danny at the end.
We can see in the beginning, like, in one of the first episodes when he's at the hospital, she's like, you don't realize how much I do. Like, I need to check the curtains. I need to do this. I need to do that. So she's very involved in the running of the place.
Yeah.
But then by the end, I think she is in that weaker state, like you said.
But it's even the way they deal with the will after Robert dies. Meg and all of the children want to put... Sally wants to put Danny back in the will, and she tells her children, oh, please put him back in the will. But the three other children are like, no, we're not going to do that. And they ignore their mother's request, so they disregard their mother after, like, the kingdom is theirs.
They sort of decide they're going to, and then Meg's like, actually, I'm going to veto this whole thing, right? She's like, I get to have an opinion, don't I? And the mom is like, well, yeah, I guess you do. And I expected more from her. I expected her to be like, after how she'd been in the past, I expected her to come in like, well, yes, but you should also consider my opinion. I'm running the place.
Yeah.
But instead we sort of see her go, well, you get to have an opinion too. So, it's your choice.
Right.
Sort of like the dad in the beginning where he leaves the choice of whether Danny's going to leave or not up to the children.
Yeah. Oh, well.
Oh, well. Look how it turned out for them.
Yeah. There's also, just like in Lear, the Rayburns are sort of royalty in Florida. It's just like Goneril, Regan, Cordelia, and Lear are royalty. They own kingdoms. Cordelia is with the King of France. Who's with the King of Albany again?
Don't know which one. They're so alike is one of the things. Yeah. They're like evil twins.
But the point is they all have different kingdoms. They're all royalty. So it's like the Rayburns in a sort of way.
There's actually that line too where Danny says like, oh, well, that's why everyone wants to work for the Rayburns, right? The loyalty. Just like, yeah. It's like loyalty. A direct Lear thing, yeah.
Yeah. That's funny. I didn't catch that.
Yeah, I was really like, wow. The loyalty.
The loyalty. Wow. Okay. No, I feel like the showrunner a lot of showrunners these days take Shakespeare and start with Shakespeare, start with the format of Shakespeare, because like Lear, it's children. It's children and a father, and the father decides to give the will, give the kingdom to some of the children, and others are left out. Mm-hmm. And yeah, the showrunner takes the play King Lear and then builds an old season out of it. But like, it's not just King Lear. It's the structure, you know. It's the structure of it. It's the and then it just goes on from there, and you can create whatever stories you want after that. But it stays in the same structure.
Yeah, and I agree with that completely, because I think we both had that feeling like when we reached the end of the season, this is a perfect structured season. We don't need it to go on longer. It would feel like it was dragging on, because Shakespeare's plays have that very strong structure, like the 4 acts, and for the most part, I mean, it
is it 4 acts or 5 acts?
Or 5 acts. I mean, I don't know how much this one is, but it's very strong.
Yeah, it's 5 acts.
Well, okay.
No, because Breaking Bad has
Roman numerals.
Breaking Bad has 5 acts too, and it's very Shakespearean.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll do that one then.
No, but I mean, that was the main point, that it follows, like, season 1 is act 1 of a play of Shakespeare, season 2 is act 2, blah blah blah. Mm-hmm. And that was the point of the comparison of Breaking Bad to Shakespeare.
I mean, more like in the overall structure of this season, though, like, I feel like the reason it feels like it finishes for the most part perfectly is because it hits all of those points that Shakespeare has sort of set up. So then when it goes on to season 2, it's like, I don't remember this being part of the script.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's my point. I don't know how with the season 2 they can, because they pretty much finished Lear in season 1. And what, you're going to do another Shakespeare play for season 2?
I mean, with the death of the next father, it could be Hamlet, right?
Yeah.
He shows up to find out what happened to his dad.
We actually don't know, because
we don't know.
We didn't watch the second season.
I feel like it's probably not Hamlet, but it could be.
Yeah. There's also very Lear. There's also the war between the DEA and the drug dealers. Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Which reminds me of the war between France and Albany in this play. Cordelia is going out with the king of France, and I don't remember who's going out with the king of Albany, or if there's another.
It's Reagan or Goneril.
Yeah, so. Reagan or Goneril.
They're the same person.
But the point is, Danny, just like Cordelia, is involved with one side, and the other children are involved with the other side. Danny is involved with the drug side, and then the children are involved with because of John, who is a cop, they're involved with the DEA. And that reminds me of the war in Lear.
For sure, yeah. And that's, I think, again, another reason why I feel like drugs play such a huge role, because it ends up sort of being the reason that this whole war is taking place.
Right. Yeah, so that's another parallel. I find, like, the war is very similar, and there's 2 clans, and one member of the family is fighting for one, and the others are fighting for the other one. It's very. That's from Lear for sure.
Mm-hmm. And another thing to do with the war is, sort of right when this war type of thing really starts to take off. And another thing I think that made me think of Danny a little bit in relation to Lear is that's sort of when he gets kicked out of the main social structure, the main world, sort of into the heath, if you will. I mean, he sort of gets bounced onto the bus, and then he's living in this foreign motel. And we know that their family owns a hotel, so to be in a different hotel is this weird sort of like being outside of the kingdom, but like almost in another kingdom, but it's
right.
completely foreign. And then also the water could sort of being on the heath because it's this place of power. I mean, obviously, water throughout the series is sort of terrifying. You know, there's gators, you can drown. There's lots of like fear to
yeah, Jane
the
texted me last night and she was like, there's too much water in this show.
There's too
I was
much.
like, why? And she was like, yeah, I'm scared of something. And I was like, why are you scared of the water?
Because, I mean, there's that scene where Sarah gets her hand stuck and you see Danny trying to like pull her out, and then he has to go back up for air, and you're like, if he's running out of air, is she running out of air? And he can't get her hand out because she's clutching, and then you realize like at some point he must have pulled her out, like when her hand went limp. I'm doing like the hand motion here, and then like there's the gators constantly. I'm terrified at the idea of like a gator suddenly snapping someone up. I thought the entire time someone was gonna get eaten by an alligator.
What?
Maybe like I watched too much Peter Pan as a kid, but I really thought an alligator was gonna come at someone. And they also talk about sharks the whole time and like blood in the water, and I'm like, so something bad is gonna happen with an animal in the water, but you know.
No, they were foreshadowing for nothing.
I know. Just that I got all worked up, and it was, well, I guess it was an animal in the water.
So, yeah. No, and there are no animals in King Lear either.
No, just people.
Anyway.
People are the real monsters.
Yeah, they are the animals. So you mentioned the water as power. That's interesting. So is there like a green world?
I mean, you could sort of look at it like, I mean, Danny goes out onto the water with Sarah and it's like, you know, we don't need an adult. And that's sort of like a throwing off of power structures. But then it does turn out they did need an adult, you know, because obviously they needed someone to help them. So,
or maybe when Danny is not, like, the family is very strict, but when he's outside of the family, when you're outside of the Rayburn bubble, that's the green world in a way. Like the power structure fell there.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Especially like in the drug areas, like when he's with the meth heads, you know, and he has that vision of like the police coming, and then he realizes it's all a dream and everything is still going as normal. That's sort of like it shows for a minute this intrusion of the police force, the social order, and then it disappears and everything's back to no social order. He can do whatever he wants with all these people.
So what is the green world in Lear when he goes away from the kingdom?
I think it is, yeah. Whenever he leaves sort of the family
so it's the same kind of
house,
of way.
Well, because I mean they're in the Florida Keys. Everywhere is the green world in reality, right? Except for the house.
Yeah, and it also feels like when it also feels like in the Rayburn household, it's very strict and they're all pretentious and they're all rich. It feels like very luxurious, very I don't know. It just feels very rich. And then when they go into the green world, there's more like the real life. There's more like the dreamy aspect disappears. It's more like, oh, there are poor people too, and there are people that are not living from because of a motel, paying their bills.
Right, there are people living in trailers and people drowning, you know, or being burnt alive on ships while they're immigrating to the U.S. to find a better life.
So does the green world change something besides the power structure?
I mean,
when a character goes into the green world, what happens?
I think they realize that the world is bigger than their
ego.
Yeah, exactly. But, you know, another thing I was thinking about yesterday was that so much of the show, you know, for the beginning, I didn't even realize that most of the siblings don't live at the family home because so much of it, like, they're always just showing up there. You know, only
wasn't John though? I feel
no,
like he was
didn't.
Always living.
Yes, and only Danny lives there. But all of us, I swear I thought Meg lived there until she mentioned like, oh, we're at my place, and I was like, wait, but she's always.
And then Danny goes
visit
visit her at her place too.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the only time I felt like I felt, oh, they actually have their places.
Yeah, it was very strange. And then, like, of course, you see John and his family, but it almost feels like it could be part of the family house. Like, it's such an institution, you know?
I mean, they all grew up there, so
Yeah.
like, but it felt like they were always at the kitchen of the house.
It did.
In the same, and living in the same house.
But then even from the beginning, you know, something interesting that I noticed is we're always getting hints that something in the house has always been broken.
Yeah.
They're always mentioning the AC is broken. Again, the AC is broken. Again, didn't we just repair it? You know, this is broken in Bungalow 3. So I think we do get the hint early on that all is not as it seems. You know, the house is not perfect. They might seem like royalty, but things are not exactly going well all the time.
Yeah. Oh, well.
Oh, well. But, you know, actually, I mentioned alligators. I just thought of something. I'm going to say it because it sounds clever. You know that moment where Meg comes clean about cheating on her boyfriend to Marco?
Yeah.
Cheating on Marco to Marco. And, sorry. And
Cheating Marco to Marco.
And she starts crying, and I just felt it was so disingenuous. And just now I thought, those were freaking crocodile tears. That's where the alligator's coming. Did anyone believe her for a second when she said, I'm so sorry? You know, she expected him to forgive her right away. Yeah. That's why she wanted him to propose to her, because then he couldn't get out of it. I was so glad that he just said, I have nothing to say to you, and he just left. I was like, Marco deserves better than this family.
Oh, boy. They all have their problems in a way. And
Marco has no problems.
And I feel, I feel the family. And I also feel like they're using people. I feel like that's why I felt like in the beginning the three children were beside Danny were kind of villainous, because they were kind of using people and looking down at people and being very Iago-like.
Yeah, very manipulative. I mean, Meg is sort of the worst example, because she's like cheating on her boyfriend and, you know, using this developer guy who is also her client. I mean, that's so not what a lawyer should be doing. You're like, they're not very, what's the word? They don't have very strong moral consciences, any of them.
And John says, the famous line from the show, we're not bad people, we did a bad thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what do you think defines a bad person? They did bad things. Come on now.
It's so hilarious. It's all the posters, but I feel like it's kind of ironic in a way that they put that line in there, because it describes them very well.
It does.
And it feels like also Goneril and Regan don't think they're bad people.
They don't. I mean, they think their father is, you know, one minute he thinks Cordelia is the best, the next he's saying he hates her. So, I mean, to their credit, it does sort of seem like he doesn't deserve to be running the kingdom anymore.
Yeah, he's not useful, and he's, as Regan says, it's the infirmity of his age, so they think he's old. So they're doing what they think is best. They're not bad people. They just did a bad thing by exiling their father.
Also, one of them, I think Regan gets Gloucester's eyes gouged out. Yeah. So there's that part. Yeah. I mean, Danny also gets his friend to beat his brother within an inch of his life, so...
Yeah, but I was talking Goneril and Regan compared to John, Kevin, and Meg. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just wanted to talk about the dismemberment.
Yeah, she likes dismemberment. Just a reminder.
Gouging someone's eyes out.
Yeah. Ugh. But then there are Iago figures. But then you learn what Danny can do, and you're like, no, they're not. Danny is worse. Danny is just worse. He's the real Iago. Ugh.
You know, the entire time I was so worried about every interaction he had with Janie, and then he finally left, and I was like, wow, he didn't actually do anything. And for some reason, I forgot that there were like 2 episodes left, and I was like, well, I guess it's over. And then I was like, oh no, I knew it, but I didn't believe myself.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, more for you to watch.
I know.
It's so great. What else? That's very Leary. There's also, I wanted to talk about you about the forgiveness part. Danny is always like, oh, apologize. I should be just forgiving you and move on, right?
Oh God, that part.
And there's this quote. I don't know if you think it's similar, but there's this quote from Edmund that says, "What you have charged me with, that I have done, and more, much more. The time will bring it out. This pass, and so I am. So am I. But what art thou, that hast this fortune on me? Thou art noble. I do forgive thee."
If thou art noble, I do forgive thee. Wow, what an Edmund line. I mean, what do you make of that quote?
I don't know. It just felt very, very Danny to me. It just felt, oh, if you're royalty, if you're that great, then I should just kneel and just forgive you and just kiss your ass too, and just it felt very Danny-like to me.
No, that scene, you think he's okay with everything that Kevin did, and then later on he says to him like, "Oh, well, you apologized, right? So I forgive you. Isn't that what people do?" And you're like, ugh.
So do you think it's similar that way?
Yeah, for sure. If thou art noble, I do forgive thee.
Yeah.
Oh.
And that's where I saw the connection between Danny and Edmund. It feels like he's like kind of making fun of them while saying, "Oh, I apologize."
It's also sort of that line, like a line that doesn't say the same thing, but it's sort of like the same attitude is when Danny's on the phone with John, and he says, like, "Oh, it's okay. Janie's with an adult. I'm an adult now." And you're like, because it's the same sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, he turns his own words on him.
If you're noble.
If you're an adult. Because what he had said like years before was, she needs to be with an adult. And he's like, she is with an adult.
Yeah.
And that's the point where really you hate Danny.
Yeah. No, well. Shakespeare would have been an incredible showrunner. Seriously. If Shakespeare was alive right now, he'd be making a ton of money because I feel like he's the perfect candidate to like build a show. He's the perfect person because he builds so many stories. Like in King Lear, there's a story of King Lear and his family, and then there's the story of Gloucester and his family. And they're all these little stories. Mm-hmm. In a single play, and I feel that's what a TV show has to do because you can't just focus. Some TV show focuses just only on a character, but I feel like that's mostly movies, and a TV show focuses on several characters and several different stories.
And that's the only thing I feel like maybe would have made the TV show actually a little bit better is if there was a little bit more of like a small side story, like the Edmund and Edgar thing, to sort of give like another texture to it, because it's so focused on.
But what about the war?
But it's different, isn't it?
Because we know in season 2 that it's not finished. The war with the drug guy, they didn't catch him in season 1, so we know that's not finished.
Yeah, but I want everything to be tied up in one way or another, like it is in Shakespeare's plays, you know?
Right. Okay.
I mean,
is the war finished in Lear?
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, but they clearly in Bloodline left it to do a season 2.
Right.
And
that's
season 3, that sucks.
But I feel like, you know what I mean? Like, in King Lear, there's that very clear side plot, like so many of his plays, and there isn't as clear a one in the TV show. Maybe it's because there's so many characters there wasn't room for it.
Right. But I feel like they also didn't do a side story because they wanted to focus on the family, and they wanted to focus on Danny, and most of the TV show, most of the season 1 focuses on we live with Danny a little bit, and we find out why he's bad, and we find out why the old story, like the old story with the daughter dead, the other daughter dead, like it leaves so much room to, like, not everything has to happen in the first episode. It just leaves so much room, and just focusing on those characters, like, you can develop so many things.
I guess the reason I say the side plot thing is because in the beginning, when the detectives were first investigating the murder of the young woman, I thought it was going to end up only being like a little bit tangentially related to the plot.
But
so I thought it was going to be like a foil to the rest of what was happening, you know, like that they were able to solve this woman's, you know, the crime of this woman's death, but not the problem within their own family, or, you know, that kind of thing.
But it started that way. It started with
exactly, but then it turned,
like side stories.
Is what I mean.
But usually most TV shows do that. They start with like several different stories, and then it all ends up to the same point, because it feels like a more rounded up story. At least good writing does.
Well, in TV shows, but I feel like Shakespeare does things a little bit differently.
Yeah, you don't feel that it's as round up?
No, I feel like it's too round. Well, I feel like the TV show of this is a little bit too rounded up, but I feel like Shakespeare, it's not that it isn't tied up at the end, but the things don't all come together. They might be solved by the same thing, but like with Edmund and Edgar and Cordelia, Regan, and Goneril, you know, the same characters might have an influence on them, but they don't all turn out to be, you know, working together to do the same thing. You know, they're not all part of the same plot.
Yeah.
I guess is what I mean.
Right.
But that was the only, you know.
Yeah, I feel like Shakespeare leaves things more to interpretation and more open.
It's true.
Yeah.
That might be a symbol of the time. People want to know exactly who they should like.
That's also why we study his plays, because so many questions are still left unanswered, and so many things can be interpreted in so many different ways, and that's what makes the play so interesting.
Exactly. I mean, you can read it sympathizing with Cordelia, you can read it sympathizing with Lear, you can read it sympathizing with Regan and Goneril a little bit, at least from the beginning.
And if you peel, like, you can watch Bloodline like 13 times, but
for sure,
there's so much, like, there's so much you can peel, and then there's nothing left at the end. But with Shakespeare, it feels like an infinite of possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree, yeah. I mean, and it's different mediums, too, because maybe if we had, you know, the definitive film of a Shakespeare play performed in, you know, 1601, then we'd be like, okay, well, this is how it's meant to be interpreted. But because we don't have that, it's a little bit more difficult.
And we see it through because the years are advancing, and we see it through the modern day eyes, while like people in 1900s were seeing it in a different way, because it was a different time
when everyone kept performing Titus Andronicus with a happy ending.
Yeah.
And Lear too. Lear actually got rewritten with a happy ending for a lot of the time, and then finally it got the recognition, and George Bernard Shaw was like, this is the greatest tragedy ever written. But for a long time people were like, no, we need to make everyone live. That'll make people happy. That makes it a great play.
Yeah. Yeah. Lear with a happy ending. No.
No.
Bloodline doesn't end with a happy ending either.
Thank goodness for that, because if it did, I mean,
well, it doesn't end.
Unfortunately.
So do you think, out of speculation, do you think that Danny's son is going to be a Danny figure season 2?
Or do you think he's going to be Hamlet?
No, I'm asking you.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
I thought you were asking the listeners.
Probably the listeners have already watched it.
Have you already watched it? Write us an email.
Yeah, write us an email. Actually, I want to know what you think of season 2 and season 3 of Bloodline. Should I watch it? Should I not watch it? I don't feel like watching it right now. howtogetawaywithshakespeare@gmail.com. Write us an email.
Yes, do that. Or tweet us at VegaGabe @JaneTheFox on Twitter or Instagram.
Okay, do you have anything left to say before we wrap it up for King Lear versus Bloodline?
I mean, I don't think so, other than I'm really surprised to see just how much King Lear was in this, sort of after the beginning, when I was like, I don't know about this.
Yeah, at the beginning I was like, no.
And then all of a sudden, yeah, especially after talking about it too, I'm like, this is King Lear.
Yeah.
So.
I feel like you need to see the season as a whole to understand how, like, to understand that it's actually King Lear. And you can't be so quick to judge because it's 13 episodes. It's not 100 pages reading.
Right.
And yeah, so things don't happen as quickly, but it has the same plot points and the same themes, and it has it's very similar. It's very it's not so much as a contrast to King Lear as The Lion King is a contrast to Hamlet.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Bloodline is very similar to.
It's very similar.
Yeah.
It doesn't do as much like Nala versus Ophelia. It's much more like this person is Cordelia, or is, part Cordelia, part Lear, part a million other people.
Yeah. So time to wrap it up. Thank you for listening, by the way. Yeah, thank you for coming back.
Thank you for coming back.
For the third time.
Or for joining us for the first time, if this is the only show you've seen so far.
Well, yeah. If you haven't watched The Shape of Water, go watch it. If you haven't watched The Lion King, what are you doing? You should have watched it already.
In your childhood.
And watch Bloodline Season 1, and then come listen to our episodes. Or you've actually already listened to that Bloodline episode, but go watch the other two. So yeah, that's it for us this week. So we're going to finish with a quote, and Jane is going to explain it. Why did you choose this quote, Jane?
I chose this quote. It's read by Albany to Goneril, and it really reminded me of something someone would say to Danny. And it's essentially saying that anything that despises where it came from, you can't really trust, which I think really relates to Danny. If he hates his father, I mean, at the same time, he's very much like him in a lot of ways, and anything that disbranches from its material sap eventually is going to turn against the other things that come from its material sap, like its siblings. So, with that said, here's the quote. O Goneril, you are not worth the dust which the rude wind blows in your face. I fear your disposition. That nature which contempts its origin cannot be bordered certain in itself. She that herself will sliver and disbranch from her material sap, perforce must wither and come to deadly use.
Bye-bye.
If you liked this podcast and want more, go on iTunes and search for How to Get Away with Shakespeare. We're also on SoundCloud, Spreaker.com, and YouTube. Again, thank you very much for listening.